everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Geezerology Roundtable on YouTube. I'm Bob here in Kansas City, Missouri. I am joined by my esteemed colleagues, Scott from Florida and Dan from St. Louis. Today, we are going to be talking about the Traveling Wilburys Volume 1, which was released on October 25th, 1988. And this consisted of a supergroup of George Harrison, Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, Jeff Lynne, and Roy Orbison. Scott's going to kick us off with his comments and thoughts about this group and this album. So Scott, take it away, buddy.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, Traveling Wilburys Volume 1. They're all in the top ranks of the music industry, especially at the time in 1988. And they all just got together and put together this album to have a little fun with each other, and it was very successful commercially. It was very successful critically. Critics loved it, fans loved it, record buying public loved it, the Grammy people loved it, everybody loved it, and it's just a great, fun little album if you haven't heard it yet. There's nothing profound here. No virtuosity going on here, no blistering guitars, no, especially profound songs here or anything like that. It's just five guys just having a lot of fun, and it comes through on this album. Nothing, and not to be taken entirely seriously, but just something to put on and have a lot of fun with. This was recorded in May of 1988. Let me just give you a little backstory in case you don't know it of how this came about. Jeff Lynne, who came out of Electric Light Orchestra, about this time was advancing his producing career. He was getting a lot of work around this time as a producer after ELO had split up. And he had produced George Harrison's album Cloud 9 in 1987. Along about late 87 or early 1988, Lynne was working on producing Tom Petty's album Full Moon Fever, which would come out later that year. He was also working on producing Roy Orbison's album Mystery Girl, which would come out later that year or the following year. And George Harrison was in Los Angeles for whatever reason. Lynne and Petty and Orbison were all working in LA. And Harrison went out to dinner with Lynne and Orbison one night, after Lynne and Orbison had done some work that day on Orbison's album. They went out to dinner and Harrison went along. And Harrison happened to mention that the UK distributor of his record label asked him for a B-side to put out on a single for the track "This Is Love," which they were releasing as another single from his album from 1987. And Harrison mentioned that, and he asked Lynne and Orbison if they would like to join him to record something the next day. He had written a song called "Handle with Care." He was going to record that as a B-side. And so he asked these guys to record it the next day. They said, yeah, that'd be great. Let's do that. But they had to have a place to record it. They didn't have a place to record it. So they rang up Bob Dylan, who happened to be home in LA, and his home in LA. And he had a recording studio in his home. They rang him up and said, can we come record there tomorrow? And he said, yeah, bring it on. So then George Harrison made another phone call because he had a guitar that he wanted to use that he'd lent to Tom Petty, who also happened to be in Los Angeles working at the time, working on his album. Harrison called up Tom Petty and said, hey, I need that guitar. Can you swing it by Bob Dylan's house tomorrow? Because we're going to be there recording. Petty said, yeah, I'll be there. Sure, I'll show up. So all these guys came together. It was originally going to be George Harrison, Jeff Lynne producing, and George Harrison and Roy Orbison guest starring on this B-side. But they ended up, all these guys decided to go in and record this song. They recorded the song and they listened to it. They said, you know what, this is too good to just stick on a B-side of a single that's only going to be released in the United Kingdom. Let's do something else with this. So Harrison went and recorded another just throwaway song that he'd written for the B-side. And they worked a little bit on getting these guys together and saying, hey, let's just do a whole album together. And that's how this came about. Started out with Handle with Care. Then they all got together over the next few months, and they actually went to Dave Stewart's house in LA, who the guy from Eurythmics, and that's where they sat and started writing and jamming out some of these songs and working up some of these songs that ended up on the Traveling Wilburys album. They recorded them all with a drum machine and just did some demos, walked out, and then they ended up going over the next few weeks and getting them all recorded in a professional studio, sometimes in London, I think a couple of them in Nashville, whatever, just wherever they can all hook up between a couple of tours that the guys were doing. The Wilbury name came from something that this is a phrase that Lynn and Harrison, when they were working on their album, if they found a little mistake in the background in a recording that they made, they were going to do it, they would just say, no big deal, we'll bury that in the final mix. And they became to talk about these mistakes as Wilburys for wheelberry. And then so Harrison suggested calling this band the Trembling Wilburys, and then Jeff Lynne actually came up with the idea, no, let's call it the Traveling Wilburys. They ended up recruiting the old friend studio musician Jim Keltner to play the drums on these tracks that they had worked up, and they got this album out there, and they recruited Michael Palin from Monty Python to write sort of a backstory for the liner notes of this album cover, and they gave them all fake names to make them all brothers and everything like that, and they built up this whole backstory of who the Traveling Wilburys were, right? It was just basically a band of wandering minstrels, and they all happened to be brothers, and they just landed and recorded this album. And in fact, all the credits on the album are credited to the fake names. It was produced by Otis and Nelson Wilbury, who are Jeff Lynne and George Harrison, and all the band members here had fake names, including Jim Keltner. They called him Buster Sideberry. He wasn't a Wilbury. He was a he was a side musician, so he was Buster Sideberry, right? Anyway, as I said, this is just a fantastic listen to this record. It's not anything that had any real impact on the direction that on the big picture of where music was going as a whole or anything like that. It was just something to have some fun with a bunch of these old pros that just got together and put out some pretty good songs that they pretty much wrote and recorded just on the fly whenever they had a chance to, between doing their day jobs, right? I really think that Dylan is a star of this album. I think his songs on here are fantastic. His singing voice is in top form. It's just wonderful. Handle with Care was the opening track. That's the one that they recorded originally as a B-side for George Harrison's single. Dylan checks in with song Dirty World. Jeff Lynne checks in with the song Rattled. Tom Petty takes the lead on Last Night. Roy Orbison closes side one with the song Not Alone Anymore. Dylan opens side two with Congratulations. George Harrison follows up with Heading for the Light. Dylan follows up with Margarita with some help with Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne. Dylan comes in again with Tweeter and the Monkey Man, which I'll get to in a minute. And then the album closes with End of the Line, which became the second single off of this album back in the height of the MTV days. So when music videos were actually singles, right? And that was the second single from this album. To me, the highlights here are the two Dylan songs on side two, Congratulations and Tweeter and the Monkey Man. The Tweeter and the Monkey Man I always thought this is basically, to me, this is Bob Dylan showing the world how to write a good Bruce Springsteen song. Right? I know Bob will enjoy that line because I've always thought that sounded like Dylan doing Bruce Springsteen, and the song, I mean, is a little darker character. He's writing about some criminals on the run, on a road trip through New Jersey, right? And it does sound like a Springsteen song, but this is just Dylan showing Bruce how it can be done. Congratulations! It's just a nice little Dylan song. And the other highlight of this album is Orbison's one song that he does pretty much on his own, Not Alone Anymore, which closes side one. This is just, all of a sudden you get just this beautifully melodic, operatic Roy Orbison vocal performance at the end of side one. And this in itself, this album, they say, I do remember that that this album did really revitalize Roy Orbison's career. He'd been on tour and everything, but he hadn't really done much in a long time. He was working on, with Jeff Lynne, as I said, a new solo album that would come out later. But with the emergence of this got Orbison back out in the public, and people started discovering him, and basically through this one song. Unfortunately, Orbison died just like a month or two after this album was released. So his solo album that they were working on, Lynne did end up getting it finished and released after Orbison died, and it actually became a big, huge hit for Roy Orbison. I think it helped revitalize Tom Petty's career. The Heartbreakers were pretty much in a rut. They hadn't been doing much lately, and then Tom Petty's album, his first solo album, was Full Moon Fever, which was released right after that. Right after this was the biggest, one of the biggest albums of Tom Petty's career. And Dylan also got a boost, I think, from this album. Great album, fun times. If you haven't heard it, go listen to it. It's there's nothing historical here, no big landmark here or anything like that. It's just a fun listen, and it came along at a time when we were looking for, when a lot of us were looking for things that weren't, like British synth pop and MTV stuff, so this it helped fill a void in that period of the late 80s for those of us who are missing people like Bob Dylan and George Harrison and Roy Orbison and things like that. And Dee, did you get a chance to listen to this thing?
I did. There was a couple of songs, of course, I was very familiar with, Handle with Care and End of the Line. Some of the other songs that had been the first time I had listened to them, particularly two of the Dylan tunes. Yeah, this was sort of a little bit of serendipity and good luck that all these guys got together. Of course, it helps that, they're respectful of each other's history and all that. I mean, you could do a whole another half hour just on how they got together and their friendships and relationships. I mean, back before the Beatles broke out in '63, they toured with Roy Orbison in England and that. And so George Harrison already had an acquaintanceship with him. And then George also had a relationship with Dylan. Dylan participated in Bangladesh and a few other things. So, George was really, he probably wouldn't say it, but he definitely was the catalyst for this supergroup get together. And supergroups as a rule in rock and roll don't really work. It's either because of egos or, my car is shinier than your car kind of thing. But this one, it was much more relaxed. They didn't have anything to prove. And, a couple things I've read that they really didn't put a lot of time into this LP. And they said they just didn't have the time to do it. Yet the songs, they work. So it does have that kind of a ELO Jeff Lynne production to it in a few cases, particularly like Handle with Care, which I really like the lyrics on that song. I thought that it was almost kind of Beatlesque. You know, there was some echo in Harrison's voice in that one. But yeah, all the songs were pretty much upbeat, and I think they were a nod to their own roots, if you want to call it roots rock, especially with Roy Orbison's his solo song, "Not Alone Anymore." And anybody that's listened to Roy Orbison, he probably has one of the top 5 voices in pop rock music. You know, you talk about expressive and emotion. Roy's right up there with Joe Cocker and others. His voice overall is just, yeah, I think it stands out on that particular cut. And Tom Petty, and you don't really know as far as, I think they credited all the songwriting to just the Traveling Wilburys, so you don't know who's you know, contributed the most. Although I got the feeling that if you sang lead, you did most of it, and then the others would toss in lines. The one Petty song, Last Night, it's got kind of something you would never hear on the Heartbreakers album. It's kind of a sad, maybe a reggae kind of feel to it, but it's a nice, easygoing record, almost something Jimmy Buffett might record at that time. But I put this on as, yeah, as kind of a revisitation to how great these guys were. They're having fun, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody that's a Dylan fan, Tom Petty fan, and a George Harrison fan, actually, because I think you covered it too. Yeah, you did, about that. This collaboration with the Traveling Wilburys was a recharge of their solo careers, because Dylan, his previous records in the 80s were pretty much, they were panned. They didn't, at best, they were lukewarm reviews. And Tom Petty, he got a boost from this. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Roy Orbison was reintroduced to a younger generation. And this has, to me, all over it, definitely Jeff Lynne's production thumb marks on it. A little heavy at times, but overall, you know, it's Jeff Lynne's glue that runs it all together. You mentioned the Dylan songs as the highlight. Well, it took me a while to get used to Dylan's voice, but for the way he writes and the way that, whether he's talking in first person or third person, I think with Dylan it's mostly third person. But I thought the song Tweeter and the Monkey Man, yeah, he was, I think it might have been just a cast off to show all this. I mean, there's more than one reference in there to Bruce Springsteen, Thunder Road, and everything is legal in Jersey unless you get caught. So yeah, maybe he was just having fun with Bruce Springsteen's popularity, and that he was going to be the next pop lyricist and prophet. And
it's like Dylan saying to Bruce Springsteen, "Here, hold my beer."
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I don't think there was any bad feelings between Dylan and Springsteen. I just think it says, hey, okay, let's do this. Dirty Work was a little bit, I got called like a, I don't know. That was more of the lesser of Dylan songs, but congratulations. I like that one. That was kind of a nice sing along with all the boys. So yeah, overall, this record, and it was already mentioned that it received critical appeal, was popular with the fans. And I think you said, yeah, they won the Grammy for Performance of the Year. And then one of the websites that came on, I guess after these guys, Classic Rock review album. They gave it album of the year. So they definitely hit it out of the park on all these. I would say the only one that, if there's maybe a weak point of that, was Jeff Lynne's song "Rattled." I can kind of take it or leave that particular tune. But overall, yeah, this is these guys having fun, kicking back, and yet they can put out quality music while they're having fun and kicking back. So that's it. It starts off great with "Handle with Care," and it finishes great with "End of the Line."
Those are the two singles, right? Those
Yeah,
are the two singles.
and I always thought with "End of the Line" was that maybe because Dylan was always a fan of Johnny Cash's, and I just wondered if that was, maybe an unintentional tribute to Johnny Cash and "Walk the Line." But yeah, in any case, the one super group that album that did live up to its stuff, and yeah, and the Traveling Wilburys kind of remind me of what the Beatles did with Sgt. Pepper's. They had to create another group.
I'm sure that's where that idea came from. Yeah, with Harrison, because Harrison was the guy he was a point man on all this stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, it was I don't think we'll see anything like this again. Not with the the contemporary music scene. It would be nice, but I don't think we'll see anything like this again. So thank you, Traveling Wilburys.
All right. I just got a couple things that I want to throw in here. I bought this album, back in the day when it first came out, listened to it quite a bit there in the late 80s and such, and then haven't listened to it for decades. So when the idea came up that we were going to talk about this, so I went and back and listened to it. And it was like seeing your best friend from high school decades later and picking up the friendship like one day had passed, not decades. Just fell in love with it all over again. And it's just like kind of wrapping yourself in a nice warm blanket, and it was so much fun to listen to again. I was struck by your comment and my feeling too, that these guys just had so much fun doing this. And all of these egos somehow got left at the door and they just had fun. And you can hear that coming across. I loved how they were able to harmonize together. And several of them, Dylan, Orbison, Petty, all have very unique voices. Lynne and Harrison are probably the most conventional singers, and they managed to take that uniqueness and really make it work. And when Roy Orbison's falsetto voice just kicks in above everybody else, I just get chills. It's just so much fun to listen to. And I want to read something from Rolling Stone that I think encapsulates this album really well. And this is what Rolling Stone wrote: "This is the best record of its kind ever made. Then again, it's also the only record of its kind ever made. One of the few rock supergroups actually deserving to be called either super or a group." I think that's a wonderful description. And my final parting thing, if you go to travelingwilburys.com, you can find all kinds of information about this, order the CDs and such. Also, you can read the official real history of this group, plus the fictionalized history they created, where they wrote the whole backstory of the Wilbury family and all of that. And it's a fun thing to check out. So I just want to echo Scott and Dan. If you haven't heard this before, go check it out. It's 5 great musicians who got together and created something very unique and did a one of, and I think Dan is absolutely there. We'll probably never see anything like this again. So I recommend it. Great, it's fun to listen to.
Yeah, I probably the I was sitting here thinking that the big revelation here, at least it was in 1988 when this album came out. The big revelation was Roy Orbison, because he had been out of the spotlight for a long time, and you kind of knew some of these songs that he did from back in the 50s and became standards, but from back in the 60s and everything. But but hearing him on this album performing with these other guys, it's just, you know, especially that track "Not Alone Anymore," where Orbison, it's an Orbison song, but Orbison does lead on a chorus here or verse there on 2 or 3 of these other songs where they're all taking turns doing lead vocals on a couple of 3 of these tracks. And every time Orbison comes in and takes a lead on one of those, it's just, I mean, it's spine tingling.
Yes,
You know? I mean,
absolutely.
that's such a remarkable voice that man had. Oh my God, it was incredible. And then hearing it in contrast with some of these other voices, with hearing it in contrast alongside of Dylan, alongside of Tom Petty, alongside of George Harrison, it's like it's a whole different physical realm, you know, on how vocal cords work, right? When Roy Orbison uses his. God, what a revelation that was. Orbison died, unfortunately, just a month or so after this album was made. In fact, he was wrapping up a tour in his home around Nashville, and he did a show around Nashville, and he's taking a couple of days off, and he was getting ready to board an airplane to fly to London, where they were going to record the video for End of the Line, and he died of a heart attack before he was able to get on an airplane. So they did end up recording the video, and if you've seen the video, and this is one of the songs where all of them take a lead vocal at some point during the song, and whenever they get to Orbison's vocal line, they just show a picture of there's a rocking chair with Roy Orbison's guitar propped up in a rocking chair. Is how they did that, and it became sort of a tribute to him. But anyway, great album. Go check it out. I can't think of enough good things to say about this thing. It's just wonderful. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. That's our take on the Traveling Wilburys. All 3 of us urge you to go seek this out and listen to it. If you've heard it before, listen to it again. You'll be surprised at how good it still sounds, right? And check us out on YouTube. We'll be back with several more things coming up, and we appreciate your patronage. So long, everybody.